All right, welcome to video 9 for Unit 5. This is a topic that I think is very important as we here in Nevada have a lot of mining occurring. We're going to look at the impacts of mining. Now before we do, we're going to look at the composition of the Earth's crust just to let you know why mining occurs, because as the saying goes, if you can't grow it, you must mine it. And essentially everything in your room, house, the school, wherever you are right now, you can attribute everything in that room to something that was either grown or mined. Now, these are three terms that are very important for you to understand. I would write these down because they're terms that just are typically only looked at with mining, or as a concentrated accumulation of minerals from which economically valuable materials can be extracted, either metals, salt, or sand. So it's very important that you look at the economically valuable materials. Metals are elements that conduct electricity, heat energy, or have other functions like copper, nickel, aluminum, and gold. And then reserves are the known quantity of a resource that can be economically recovered. So looking at just some of the reserves that remain, global reserves versus U.S. reserves, iron, aluminum, copper, lead, zinc, gold, nickel, cobalt, manganese, and chromium. You can see that in the United States, we don't have nickel, cobalt, manganese, or chromium in our reserves. We're running out of aluminum. We have, according to this table, 2 years left. This was in 2007. I couldn't tell you if we still do or not. That's a good question. So look it up. So some of the techniques that are done, we're going to specifically look at surface and subsurface mining. Taligs, that should be tailings. I'm going to change that while we're watching this because that is kind of an important term. Tailings and slag are two terms that we'll look at the very end to discuss what they are. So when we talk about surface mining, there's actually a couple methods. One is strip mining, where you essentially remove little strips of soil, I guess huge strips of soil and rock, to expose ore. The idea of strip mining is that the ore that you're looking for is not very deep. You remove the material, you extract the resource, and then you return the mining spoils or tailings, which is unwanted waste materials. So one of those terms from that last slide, tailings. Tailings are just the unwanted waste materials. This is the primary method for getting coal and for slag. So this is an example of strip mining, where you start at one length and you work your way down, trying to get those resources that are closer to the surface. Open pit mining is also done. This is when there is resource that's fairly close to the surface and it's economical to remove a great amount of land to get to that resource. Copper is done this way. Gold is done this way. There are many surface mines in Nevada. If you ever get a chance to go out to Elko and Carlin, Nevada in the east, you can see surface mines. There are many of them. There's a massive surface mine in Salt Lake City. Another type of surface mining is mountaintop removal, where you remove the entire top of the mountain and you use explosives. They deposit the tailings in nearby regions. This is, again, surface. This is an example of an area that had mountaintop removal before and after on Google Earth. There's also placer mining, which is where you look for minerals and metals in river sediments. So this is how diamonds are found, tantalum and gold. The California gold rush, for example, was done in placer mining, hence the area Placer County. Placers are just where you're looking for minerals and metals in the sediments of rivers, because the heavy minerals fall to the bottom and are carried with the river. Now, subsurface mining is a little bit different. This is typically when you're looking for something that's more than 100 meters below the surface, and it's very expensive. This is being done for coal, diamonds, and gold. Essentially, you have horizontal tunnels and then vertical shafts with elevators to transport the ore. So this is just an example of some types of mines. A slope mine, where you go down, and then a vertical shaft single stage hoisting mine. Again, in Nevada, we have many of these underground mines. And the idea is that the ore is too low to have an open pit mine, like over in the right side. So you go deeper, and instead of removing all of the area, you just create shafts. Now, some of the impacts, well, there's air impacts, which can cause dust particles, methane and carbon dioxide through fossil fuel emissions. Water can be contaminated as it percolates through the tailings, because tailings can contain chemicals that are used to remove ore chemically from their parent material. You can also have soil erosion and soil nutrient loss through the removal. Sometimes it's replaced. There's vegetation that is taken out, so this can increase the erosion. There's also a loss of biodiversity through habitat destruction and degradation, and the roads that are built, which cause habitat fragmentation. Some of the human health impacts are some of the respiratory diseases like black lung and cystic fibrosis, mercury poisoning. You've probably heard of black lung. The idea of black lung is those particles being breathed in. Now, some of the legislation that's been put in place for mining comes from the Mining Law of 1872, the General Mining Act, which is mostly unchanged and still in effect today. This allows individuals and companies to recover ores and fuels from federal lands, and there are very few provisions in place for environmental protection. The idea is that if you find it, you stake a claim, and then you get to have that ore, paying a small fee to the federal government for the land use. The Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act of 1977 was put in place to say that land had to be minimally disturbed during coal mining and then reclaimed. So reclaimed meaning you had to return it to its original state or better. Some related legislation is the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Superfund Act, which we'll look at a little more in the coming units as we talk about environmental legislation. So that is the end of our 9th video all about mining. Our next video will be all about the impacts of urbanization.